differences for today. Sums and differences, we automatically think of what two operations? Sums and differences. Zay? Adding and subtracting. But as you look at page 108, 109, what do you notice? What are we working with today when we talk about this? Mariah? Fractions. Fractions. So what's going to happen today is we are going to estimate the fractions before we add them or before we subtract them to find out. We're not going to actually be estimating the sums and differences. When we estimate, we'll estimate first, and then we'll do our adding and subtracting, and what we get will be an estimate. We're not going to estimate after we get our sum or difference. So it's kind of misleading that way. So there are different rules for different kinds of fractions. So let's address, first of all, for regular fractions. And what I mean by regular fractions are, they're not mixed numbers, and they're not improper. So for example, if I had the fraction 3/8, no mixed number attached, no whole number attached to it to make it a mixed number, it's just a regular 3/8. When I'm working with these regular fractions, I will be estimating each of these as either closest to 0, closest to half, or closest to 1/2. As I look at 3/8, the one thing I want to look at first is the denominator. Denominator is 8. And I'm going to kind of go in 3 different parts here. For 0, for half, and for 1. Now, theoretically speaking, hypothetically speaking, if I wanted to represent the number 0 as a fraction, how many eighths would that be? 0. If I wanted to represent half with 8 as my denominator, what would my numerator have to be? Decalib. And if I wanted to represent the whole number 1, 8. Okay. So now I put that 0, half, and 1, I put it into fraction form using the same denominator that I already have. Now what you'll need to ask yourself is that 3/8, is it closest to 0/8, 4/8, or 8/8? Desi? 4/8, so I would round that to be what? Half. 3/8 is really close to 4/8. 4/8 was my half. Okay? Any question there? Do another one. Yes, ma'am? You've got it. Well, plus 3 is only 1 away from 4, right? It's how many away from 0? 3. So it's still closer just by being 1 away, right? Okay. Let's say, let's use 9/10. What fraction with 10 as a denominator is going to represent 0? 0. How about half? And how about 1/2? 10. So these are easy. The 0 and 1/2. For 0, it's always going to be 0 as your numerator. For 1/2, it's always going to be the same as the denominator. A half, it's not so bad now when our denominator is even, because all we have to do is cut that denominator in half, and we'll get it. So now, 9/10, is it closest to 0/10, 5/10, or 10/10? So I would round that to be what? 0, half, or whole? Yeah, 1/2. Just 1. Now, let's rewind and say, all right, I'm going to take the 3/8, and I'm going to add it to my 9/10. Using the estimation that we just did, we had said that 3/8 was closest to half, and we said that 9/10 was closest to 1 whole. Here is where we're going to estimate that sum that was mentioned in the beginning. So a half plus 1 whole should give me what, Brian? 1. Now it's okay to have that mixed number. Question to Kayla or stretching? Yes, of course we'll do some with odds. Okay? Seven 11th. For 0, like we said, that's going to be a 0. For 1, that's going to be an 11. Now for the half, this is where it becomes a little bit trickier than if you're working with an even denominator. In the past, I was able, with the even denominators, I was just able to cut this in half. However, cutting an odd number in half is a little bit more difficult. What is 11 cut in half? And what do you do if you don't know how? Or if you don't know off the top of your head what 11 cut in half is? Frank? I could divide it by 2. And since we've ditched remainders and we're using decimals now, I can take this and make this a 5.5. But does 5.5 work well in a decimal or in a fraction? Decimals don't work too well in fractions because they're usually one or the other. So since 5.5 comes in between what 2 whole numbers? What 2 whole numbers does it come in between? 5 or 6. Now you could use the 5.5 if you wanted to, just for a reference. Just understand that that's halfway. Where would we put that 7? Where would we put that 7? Definitely not closest to 0. 5 or 6 or 11? Yeah, because it's only 1 away from the 6, right? So I would be comfortable with half for that one. Okay. I'm going to give you an odd one and give you an opportunity to test it out. Twenty-one 21/21, 1, 0. Where does half come in? What is exactly half of 21? Edsel. 10.5. There's another trick you can use. If you're not, you should be relatively comfortable with this now because we have worked with division with decimals before. But if you go one denominator lower and one higher, what's half of 20? 10. What's half of 22? 11. 10 or 11. Now, where does that 16 fit? Closer to half or closer to 1 whole? Desi. So which one should you pick? I would pick 1 whole. Yeah. It's always better to overestimate if it's really close. If it's really close and it's about halfway, it's about the same from one to the other, probably a good idea to overestimate. If you're grocery shopping and you've got money in your wallet, money in your purse, and you want to find out if what you have in your cart is going to be able to be covered by what you have, why is it always good to overestimate? Yeah, so when you get up there, it shouldn't be as much as what you thought. You have plenty of money to cover it. No one likes to go up there. It's embarrassing to go up there and say, oh, oops, I got to put something back. Then you got to try to pick what you want to put back. Not always fun. Okay, now mixed numbers. For mixed numbers, we go by a different set of rules. And basically, that rule we're going to round to the nearest whole. We are going to round to the nearest whole. And after we take a look at this, it should make perfect sense to you. Because when you're rounding, what's that magic number that tells you if you're going to round up or if you're going to stay the same? 5. If it's 5 or larger, we always round up. So let's take a look at a mixed number like 1 and 7/10. Now, if I were putting this mixed number into decimal form, remember this is a power of 10. It's got 1 0, so one place after the decimal. As a decimal, 1 and 7/10 looks like this, right? And if we were rounding to the nearest whole, there's my whole number. I look at the digit after it. Is that 7 a 5 or larger? Therefore, that would round to 2. See, 1 and 7/10 is closer to 2 than it is to 1. So we'll still use half, but we use half now as the determining factor if I'm going to go up or if I'm going to go down or stay the same. Okay? So 1 and 7/10. What's half of 10? 5. Is that 7 bigger than the 5? Then we're good. Okay? Like 2 and 1/6. 6 is the denominator in my fraction. Is that 1 half of 6 or larger than 6? Or larger than half? So therefore, I'm going to round the 2 and 1/6 down to 2. Nearest whole is 2. No fraction. So if we take 2 and 1/6 and we add it to our 1 and 7/10, 2 plus 2 will equal 4. So if you see a regular fraction, you're going to use 0, half, or 1. When you see a mixed number, you're going to round to the nearest whole. So different set of rules for each. Okay? I'll give you a couple to try. And it'll kind of test your knowledge of both. Let's do 4/5 plus 1/8. Try those two. Okay, at least while you're getting used to this, it's a good idea to put down what you rounded each to and then add it. So when I look at 4/5, it's a regular fraction. It's 4/5 closest to 0/5, 2 or 3/5, or 5/5. Remember we said if it's that close, always round up. So we're going to use which one for 4/5? Half or 1? Good, I'm seeing 1. And for 1/8, 0/8, 4/8, or 8/8. So 1 plus 0 should be 1. Now here I have a mixed number and a regular fraction, so I'm going to play by two different sets of rules. 3 and 4/7. Now, 7 as my denominator, what is half of 7? 3.5, right? So 3 or 4, but the 4, since technically half of 7 is 3.5, is that 4 larger than half? Yes, it is. Not by much, but it is. Therefore, 3 and 4/7 rounds to 4, the whole number 4. 3/8, there's my regular fraction. 0, half, or 1. 0/8, 4/8, or 8/8, which is half. So 4, take away a half, just a half, 3 and 1/2. Yes? No, it's if the fraction. Remember we said what's the magic number for rounding up is 5. And 5 as a fraction is what? When we think of 5, halfway, right? 0.5 is half. So if this fraction has a value that's half or greater, I round up. How do I know it has a value of half or greater? Because half of 7 is 3.5, right? This 4, is that greater than 3.5? Therefore, it's greater than half. Therefore, we round up to 4. Okay? Let's look at one of these together. 4 2/3 plus 7 11/16. Two mixed numbers, rounding both to the nearest whole. 4 2/3. It's 2/3, half or greater. It's definitely not half. Is it greater or less than half? 2/3. Greater. So 4 2/3 rounds to 5. 7 11/16. How many 16ths is exactly half? 8. Is that 11 greater than the 8? Therefore, 7 11/16 rounds to 5 plus 8. 13. Yeah, let's do another one. Nine 1/3 minus 5 7/10. So we found out that 2/3 was greater than half. How does 1/3 fare? What's half of 3, right? 1.5. Is that less than half? Less than half? It's not half. So it stays a 9 minus 5 7/10. 7/10 greater than half. So 6, 9 minus 6, 3. Better? Oh, Casimir. Try those two. Casimir. 3/5. Are we looking at 0/5, 2 or 3/5, or 5? Okay, so what is that? 0, half, 1. Half plus 1/7 is 0/7, 3 or 4/7, or 7/7. So half plus 0, half. Yeah, we got half for that one. Yes, good. It's Monday. 6 2/3. 2/3 greater than half. So this rounds to nearest whole. So what's nearest whole? Is it closer to 6 or closer to 7 since it's greater than half? 7. And 13/16. So are we looking at closer to 0, closer to half, closer to 1 whole? 7 plus 1. Now, some of these you can tell by looking at them, hopefully. You know, it's all about trying to make it relate to you. You work with points every single day. You work with fractions just like this every day that you're in school, because technically that's how your assignments are looked at, graded, is you have the total number of problems on the bottom and the number you had correct on the top. And the closer, you want to be the closest to 1. You want to be the closest to 100%. Okay? You don't want to be anywhere near 50%. You certainly don't want to be anywhere near 0. So the closer that you have your numerator to your denominator, usually a pretty good indication you're going to be closer to 1. Now, unless you're half or unless you're, well, 2/3 works pretty well that way too. Okay? So try to make it recognizable. And the more it gets recognizable, the more you work with it. Like look at number 7 in your book, 109. 8 and 4/7. 4/7. Closer to, are we working with closer to 8 or 9 with 4/7? 9. And 2 and 3/8. It's almost half, but not quite. So we stay at 2. So 9 minus 2? 7. Okay. Let's take a look at our sheets for today. Anyone absent today? Ill? You might be ill, but you're not absent.
Well, we don't.
Take a look at 1 through 12. Estimate each sum or difference. When you see mixed numbers, you round to the nearest whole. When you see regular fractions, you round to 0, half, or 1. Let's take a look at number 1 together. 1 and 1/9 plus 2 and 4/5. 1/9. Anywhere near half? 1/9? No. So that one will stay at 1. 2 and 4/5. Goes to 3, right? So 1 plus 3? 4. Please make sure that you are adding when you're supposed to add and you're subtracting when you're supposed to subtract. Okay, a lot of people make those mistakes carelessly. Try to avoid making those. Now, that's how numbers 1 through 12 go. 12 is a little bit, well, they just add one more in there. So you just have one more to add. Tequila, question on 1 through 12? We look at the fraction. Okay, if I were to look at, if we were just to look at 1/9 and just look at it like a regular fraction, right? I would say 0 would be 0/9, 1 whole would be 9/9, and what's half of 9? And if I don't know for sure, $4.5, right? So I'd use 4 or 5. Where does that 1 come? Is that 1 closest to 0, 4 or 5, or 9? So if it's less than half, I will stay with the whole number that's with it. If it's greater than half, then I'll round up to the next whole number. Okay? It's like if you had money in your pocket and you had $1.11. Would you say you have closer to $1 in your pocket or $2? 1. But if you had $1.78, would you say you're closer to $1 or 2? 2. So the idea is that anytime you're more than half or even at half, you're going to round up. Just like we talked about that magic number of 5. It works the same way with these fractions. But 5 isn't really 5, it's half. 13 through 20, let's take a look at real quick. Set these up as inequalities. So basically, you have 2 problems to do for each of these. 5/8, 5/12, these are both regular fractions, correct? So 5/8, closest to 0, half, or 1? 5/8. Half, because half is 4/8, right? 5/12, closest to 0, half, or 1? Half. Half plus half equals 1 whole on this side. 2 and 1/12, mixed number. Is that 1/12 going to put me over to 3? Is that half? So that's a 2. How about 1 and 6/7? Put you to 2. 2 minus 2. So now here's that inequality. 1 is greater than 0. What lines? I don't know. Probably just to put this, Edsel, because that circle is pretty small. Okay. Now, seeing as though we are approaching Wednesday, I don't know if you knew, is the end of the quarter. Okay, so we're going to have a couple of more math grades left before the end of the quarter. Doesn't mean you're going to get your report cards on Wednesday. But I will make numbers 13 through 20 extra credit. Don't expect full points for each of these. I may award, like, well, since we're working with fractions, maybe a half a point. I'll round up. So say you end up getting like 2.5. You got 5 of them right. If I were to round using the method I learned today, how many points would you get? Is that half or larger? Round to the nearest whole? I'd give you 3 points. Okay? Now, it would be wise for you to do so. Okay? It's always smart to do the extra credit.